Our story begins with a scavenger whose livestream caught the attention of every police officer online, and not because he was picking up plastic bags. Whether it was discarded machinery or even just digging for wild vegetables, he somehow managed to unearth a 1,000-year-old ancient tomb every single time. Naturally, this left the local authorities in a state of collective disbelief. Sometimes they truly felt like reporting him, as this scavenger was doing all of their work. We find our protagonist, Tong, squatting on the curb with a look of utter despair. Even now, he could hardly believe his current situation. To be honest, he was stunned to realize he had actually transmigrated. He hadn't had a drop of water all day, let alone a meal, all because of a show. He was a participant in a career observation livestream, and his assigned role was scavenging. He had to feed himself and his massive cameraman. The problem was that Tong had grown up in luxury. He had no idea how to actually scavenge. Just then, his cameraman, Fatty, spoke up. Fatty urged him, saying that since no one was around, Tong should hurry over and rummage through the trash cans across the street. If they didn't find something soon, they would starve to death long before the show's production team could even disqualify them. Tong lowered his head in shame, staring at the ground for a long moment before telling Fatty to wait just a little longer while a dog passed by. Fatty cried out that he wasn't even asking for food anymore, just a discarded water bottle to liquid suffice. It was a pathetic sight, really. His head throbbing, Tong finally steeled his resolve. Since he was here, he decided he might as well give it his absolute best effort. After all, winning meant a $10 million grand prize, which would certainly make life much easier. With that thought, he leaped up from the ground. He bared his teeth at a stray dog in the distance, ready to fight for scraps, when suddenly, a crisp chime echoed in his mind. A system had activated for the former young master, granting him a newbie reward in the form of a specialized detection skill. The system encouraged him, claiming he could find success even in scavenging. Hearing this, Tong nearly coughed up blood in frustration. He felt like the world was mocking him, until he noticed the silver trash can in front of him was emitting a faint, reddish glow. A transparent virtual screen appeared, informing him that searching this specific bin would yield items worth no less than 1,000 yuan. He swallowed hard, imagining how many meat buns 1,000 yuan could buy. Without a second thought, he dashed toward the bin. He dove straight into the greenery to get to it, leaving Fatty completely stunned. Scavenging was one thing, but this was something else entirely. Fatty was genuinely panicked, shouting at Tong to stop pulling the trash can out of the ground. After all, these bins are public property. Damaging them meant heavy fines, and in their current state, they didn't have a penny to spare. Meanwhile, the viewers in the live stream were equally baffled. They wondered if participant number 3 had finally lost his mind under the pressure. Even a nearby stray dog seemed completely stunned by the display. It watched as its own dinner bowl was hauled away. But then, something caught everyone's eye as Tong flipped the bin over and dumped everything out. A pile of refuse spilled onto the ground. We see that the source of the red glow wasn't the bin itself, but a black plastic bag wrapped around something heavy. Tong frowned, wondering if the bag contained something legendary to be worth 1,000 yuan. Driven by desperation, he reached out and tore it open. Fatty hurried over with the camera, pleading with Tong to put the bin back before the stray dog attacked. To be honest, Fatty knew he couldn't win that fight. He reminded Tong they were scavengers, not beggars, but his words suddenly cut off. He stared at the severed hand inside the bag and let out a piercing scream. Tong, paralyzed with fear, finally snapped back to reality. The two of them scrambled out of the greenery, collapsing on the pavement to retch in pure horror. The livestream chat erupted in a frenzy of terror. Viewers couldn't believe their eyes, questioning if they had actually just seen human remains on screen. The realization that these were human fragments sent a chill through the audience. It seemed participant number 3 was cursed with the worst luck imaginable. Just as the debate reached a fever pitch, the stream was abruptly cut. Behind the scenes, the production staff were in a state of absolute chaos. They had seen the gruesome discovery clearly through the lens. Although they had emergency protocols to kill the feed, the damage had already been done. While the staff panicked, the director, Neo Daden, calmly sipped his tea. He watched the frantic scene with a level of composure that was almost unsettling. He told them there was no need to worry, as unexpected events are part of the business. To him, this was just a coincidence they would move past. He instructed them to keep a close eye on participant number 3, Ling Hui. If the man's mental state crumbled, he would simply be disqualified early. The staff nodded, deeply impressed by Director Neo's nerves of steel. It takes a certain kind of person to stay that calm after seeing such a sight. Meanwhile, Tong and Fatty finally regained their composure enough to call the local authorities. In less than half an hour, the street was transformed. Police vehicles swarmed the area, and long yellow cordons were quickly established. A massive crowd of curious neighbors gathered, refusing to leave the scene. It seemed everyone who could walk had come downstairs to watch. Even the elderly who were bedridden insisted their families wheel them out to see the commotion. They were carried to the scene, their faces pale with fear, yet their eyes sparkled with that unique curiosity for drama as they crowded the police line. Inside the perimeter, an officer reported to Captain Wang Jiangwo that, based on the clean cuts at the edges of the discovered fragments, they likely belonged to the same victim as the previous remains, though they had to wait for lab results. Wang Jiangwo wiped sweat from his hands. He ordered the remains taken to the station and then turned his gaze toward Ling Hui and Fatty, telling them they needed to come along for questioning. Before Wang Jiangwo could even finish his sentence, Ling Hui was already nodding eagerly, asking if the police station provided free meals. Beside him, Fatty silently gave a thumbs up, having never seen someone try to beg for a meal from the police before. Wang Jiangwo was momentarily speechless. However, looking at their disheveled faces, he eventually nodded and confirmed it wouldn't be a problem. To be honest, it looked like they needed it. He added that for finding the remains, the Bureau would provide 1,000 yuan reward. Ling Hui was overjoyed, so this was the money the system promised. After that, he and Fatty happily climbed into the police car. Once the statements were signed and the reward was in hand, they waved goodbye to Wang Jiangwo. They left the station in high spirits, carrying their empty sacks. Standing at the entrance, Wang Jiangwo finally let out a long sigh of relief. He had assumed the trauma of finding human remains would ruin their appetites, but they had somehow managed to polish off 7 bowls of noodles. They had even eaten the portions meant for him and his team. Meanwhile, as they walked down the street, the two of them restarted their live stream. After a few steps, Fatty complained that he was still hungry, claiming he felt too shy to eat his fill while Captain Wang was watching him. With a grand wave of his hand, Ling Hui agreed to go for barbecue. Since the sun had set, he figured the barbecue street might hold some valuable scrap. They made their way to the bustling food street, but just as they sat down to order, the familiar system prompt flashed before Ling Hui's eyes. It told him that searching a nearby trash can would yield a reward of no less than 1,000 yuan. The system urged him to act immediately. He swallowed hard and stood up, walking straight toward the bin. Sure enough, he pulled out a familiar-looking black plastic bag. His hands trembled as he lifted the heavy object, preparing to tell Fatty to call the police again. Suddenly, the shop owner rushed out to confront him. The man pointed right at his nose, shouting for him to put the bag down and demanding to know why he was bringing trash into the shop. The owner claimed he knew they were trouble the moment they arrived, and now they were scavenging right at his doorstep. Ling Hui remained silent. How on earth was he supposed to explain this? The shop owner, seeing Ling Hui remain silent and noticing his hands trembling slightly as he held the bag, felt a sudden spark of greed. He wondered if there was something valuable inside. With that thought, he snatched the bag away, claiming it was something he had lost from his shop and accusing Ling Hui of stealing it. A young waiter nearby joined in, pointing at the black plastic bag and insisting that he had seen the owner accidentally drop it into the trash earlier that afternoon. He accused Ling Hui of trying to steal their property and threatened to call the police immediately. To be honest, his acting was quite convincing for someone telling such a blatant lie. As we watched the owner and his employee go back and forth, Ling Hui felt his mind spinning. He couldn't believe they were bold enough to claim ownership of whatever was in that bag. He decided to test them one last time, asking if they were absolutely certain the item belonged to them. The owner snapped back, saying his employee was a witness. He told Ling Hui to either order food or stop interfering with his business. With that, he carried the heavy bag back into the shop, completely unaware of what he was actually holding. Ling Hui rubbed his nose and reached out toward Fatty, who was standing there in a daze, asking to borrow his phone. He needed to make a very specific phone call. He wondered aloud if the police bureau would offer an extra reward for identifying a suspect. A moment later, the call connected, and he asked for Captain Wang Jiangwo. He introduced himself as Ling Hui, the man from earlier that day, and calmly explained that he had found another one of those items they were looking for. He gave the location as the Overlord Barbecue Shop and added, with a touch of irony, that the owner claimed the item was his and even had a witness to prove it. He urged the police to hurry over, but the moment he hung up the phone, the shop owner came sprinting out of the building, clutching the black bag and screaming in terror. The man was howling for help, telling everyone to run and begging someone to call the police. It seems he had finally realized what he had reclaimed from the trash. As the owner collapsed in incoherent screams, Fatty instinctively raised the camera. In the live stream, the fans were losing their minds at the sheer absurdity of the situation. They began congratulating contestant number 3 for finding yet another piece of the human puzzle. It was a grim joke, but the viewers were absolutely hooked. Earlier that day, the stream had fewer than 100 viewers. Now, tens of thousands were watching. After all, it's not every day you see someone solve a crime like this. Ling Hui was oblivious to the online fame, as he was busy at the station trying to comfort the sobbing shop owner. It was a sight to behold, really. He told the man there was no use crying, and that he should take responsibility for his claims, suggesting he just be more careful in his next life, which, naturally, didn't help at all. The owner only wailed louder at Ling Hui's comfort. Finally, Wang Jiangwo barked an order for his men to take the shop owner away and put him in a patrol car. The captain then turned his suspicious gaze toward Ling Hui and Fatty. After all, finding 2 major pieces of evidence in a single day was beyond a mere coincidence. As we watched this unfold, things were starting to look rather suspicious. Under Wang Jiangwo's intense gaze, Ling Hui felt a chill run down his spine and quickly tried to explain that it was all just luck. He insisted it was pure chance, explaining they were just looking for a late-night snack when they saw the overflowing trash can and decided to search for some recyclable bottles. Wang Jingwo took a deep breath. To be honest, he truly wanted to suspect these two, but they were participating in a show with a 24-hour live stream, leaving them no time to commit a crime. The problem was that the police had deployed everyone today, searching every corner, even the toilets, and found absolutely nothing. And yet, here were these two. They had found two major pieces of evidence just by rummaging through a trash can. Wang Jingwo sighed helplessly, telling them that was enough and they needed to follow him. He told them to return to the station to follow the standard procedure, adding that once they finished assisting, they should take their reward money and leave quickly. Wang Jingwo turned toward the patrol car, but after a few steps, he paused and looked back. He informed them that every single one of the city's 30,000 trash cans would be cleared tonight. Ling Hui stood there, completely bewildered by the news. He wondered if the captain was trying to steal his business or if there was some other hidden meaning behind the warning. Before getting into the police car, Fatty didn't forget to scavenge the skewers from a nearby table that hadn't been eaten yet. Since the bill was paid, he figured it would be a waste to leave them. The two were now quite familiar with the station's routine, and by the time they finished their statements, it was late into the night. Fatty held his skewers with a look of pure grievance. He complained to Ling Hui that the cafeteria was already closed, wondering how they were supposed to enjoy their meat now. Ling Hui stood in the courtyard, scanning the area for a solution. Finally, his gaze landed on the security guard's door. Seeing the old man was still awake, he approached and asked if he happened to have a small stove to help heat up some barbecue. He even noticed the old man had some alcohol. Under the guard's bewildered stare, Ling Hui led Fatty into the small shack, making themselves right at home. Soon, the three of them were huddled around a small round table, enjoying the skewers and beer. Ling Hui remarked that the old man's life seemed quite comfortable, drinking while on duty. Upon hearing this, the old man, who was already quite tipsy, suddenly burst into loud sobs. It was a rather unexpected turn of events, to say the least. He wailed about how bitter his life was, explaining that he had waited 50 years for his first love and had finally outlived her husband. But today, she had remarried and hadn't even notified him, not even giving him the chance to bring a gift. Ling Hui watched the sobbing old man in utter disbelief. Feeling for the man, Ling Hui stood up and told him not to be sad, promising to go grab a couple more bottles so they could drink their fill together. Leaving Fatty behind, he ran to the nearby convenience store for more alcohol. However, 2 minutes later, he came rushing back in, clutching a metal trash can from the entrance. With a loud thud, he slammed the trash can onto the table. The old man blinked, staring at the waist-high bin in total confusion. The old man stared at the waist-high trash can, completely stunned. Even for a seasoned drinker like him, using such a massive vessel for alcohol seemed a bit excessive. Meanwhile, we see Wang Jingwo dressed in a cleaner's uniform, directing his team as they meticulously search through the city's trash bins. He urged them to check every corner, noting that if a couple of scavengers could find evidence twice in a row, it meant the criminal was acting with intent. He was certain the final bag of remains had to be in a bin somewhere. Hearing this, his officers gritted their teeth, their hearts filled with a new sense of drive. They told themselves that no matter what, they couldn't let the scavengers find the last piece first. After all, they were the professionals here, or so they hoped. However, after clearing 5 entire blocks, the only thing they had to show for it was a trunk full of plastic bottles. To be honest, they just didn't want to leave empty-handed. Wang Jingwo's gaze swept over the mountain of bottles in the back of the car. He couldn't believe they had collected so many. Just then, his phone rang, vibrating against the plastic pile. He pulled it out and saw it was Old Man Sheen, the security guard from the station. Now, Old Sheen was a man of vast experience, having spent 30 years guarding doors. He had guarded factories, office buildings, and even female dormitories. In short, there wasn't a gate in the city that Old Sheen hadn't watched over at some point. The old man had a stellar reputation for being responsible and never causing trouble. But as soon as Wang Jingwo answered the call, he heard a heart-wrenching scream. Old Sheen wailed for little Wang to come back immediately, shouting that there was a head inside a trash can. And not just any trash can, either. It was the one right in front of the police station. Wang Jingwo's mind practically exploded, the words station entrance and trash can echoing in his head. After forcing himself to calm down, he immediately roared at his scattered team to pack up and return to base at once. The officers swarmed back, still clutching their bags of literal trash. They asked why they were leaving so suddenly, when there were still several streets left to search. They even joked that a few more blocks might cover their gas money for the night. It seemed they had truly discovered the hidden treasures of the waste management world. One officer bragged about finding a brand new smartwatch, while another asked the group to guess the brand of some designer socks he'd just unearthed. Wang Jingwo listened to his team's enthusiastic descriptions of their scavenged loot, his face darkening with every word. He told them all to write a 30,000-word reflection report. An hour later, the team arrived back at the station, only to find our 2 scavengers waiting. They were squatting in a neat row with Old Sheen, facing a silver trash can. Wang Jingwo's teeth nearly shattered from grinding them so hard. Wang Jingwo felt like his teeth might actually shatter. He had deployed over 100 officers to dig through trash for hours, only to have the prize stolen right from his own doorstep. After hearing Old Sheen explain how it all happened, he was so furious he nearly lost his mind on the spot. He turned to the guard, demanding to know if 30 years of experience meant nothing. He reminded the old man that drinking on duty was strictly forbidden, regardless of the excuse. And then, his icy gaze shifted toward our two scavengers. He looked at them with a mixture of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated irritation. Lin Hui told Wang Zhengwo not to worry, claiming they weren't trying to compete anymore. After all, they had already realized there was nothing left in the bins worth finding. He even offered to help the police contact a recycling station, noting that the show's designated buyers offered better prices. A sharp crack echoed through the room. It was the sound of Wang Zhengwo's teeth grinding together. Technically, all the evidence was now found, and he should have been happy, but for some reason, he couldn't even force a smile. At least, he told himself, he would likely never have to see these two again. Half an hour later, our duo walked out of the station with 1,000 yuan in hand as the sky began to pale. Lin Hui and Fatty were beyond exhausted. Fatty groaned that he couldn't hold out much longer, suggesting they find a place to sleep or perhaps just become nocturnal. To be honest, the idea of sleeping through the day and working at night didn't sound half bad at that moment. However, with only 3,000 yuan to their names, they were far from being able to afford luxury. City hotels were out of the question, so Lin Hui flagged down a taxi. He told the driver to take them somewhere outside the city where they could sleep. Anywhere would do, as long as they could lie down. As he spoke, both he and Fatty let out massive yawns. The driver gave a short grunt of agreement and started the car. Almost immediately, a deafening chorus of snoring erupted from the back seat. Glancing in the rearview mirror, the driver saw that both of them had already fallen into a deep sleep. He gritted his teeth, feeling a sudden surge of annoyance at the sight. He muttered that these youngsters were clearly up to no good, likely having spent the whole night at an internet cafe. They reminded him exactly of his own troublesome kid at home. He figured if he couldn't fix his own son, he could at least teach these two a lesson. With a mutter and a heavy foot on the gas, he sped out of the area. Lin Hui felt like he was having the best sleep of his life. A gentle breeze was blowing, and the bed felt incredibly soft, better than any five-star hotel, really. He was just about to roll over and keep dreaming when Fatty suddenly shook him awake. Fatty asked where on earth they were and how they had ended up there. Lin Hui slowly opened his eyes, only to be met by a vast expanse of lush green grass. Fatty continued to ramble, remarking that the taxi driver was actually a decent guy. Fatty had checked their belongings and found that their money and the camera were all still there. The driver had only taken a small amount for the fare before leaving them. Fatty marveled that they had truly met a saint, someone who not only drove them all this way, but even carried them out of the car to avoid waking them. Lin Hui stood up to stretch his stiff limbs, agreeing that in this day and age, finding such a kind-hearted driver was a rare thing indeed. The two of them chatted while packing their things to set off again. It was already past 4 in the afternoon, and by the time they reached civilization, it would be dinner time. However, as they stepped out, the savory scent of roast chicken suddenly wafted toward them. Given where they had been sleeping, they wondered if someone was camping nearby. Following the delicious aroma, Lin Hui and Fatty walked out of the small grove. But the moment they saw what lay before them, a chill ran straight up their spines. Before them stood a dense, endless sea of tombstones stretching as far as the eye could see. It turned out the driver had dropped them off right in a cemetery. As they stood there in a daze, a sudden, thunderous shout erupted from the distance, demanding to know who they were and what they were doing there. The voice accused them of being the thieves who had been stealing offerings, noting their camera and large sack. A call for help rang out to catch the tribute thieves. Before Lin Hui could even attempt an explanation, several people in uniforms appeared brandishing hoes and shovels, while an older woman snatched up a roast chicken to charge at them. Without a second thought, Lin Hui grabbed Fatty and they bolted into the depths of the cemetery without looking back, running until their lungs burned. After covering nearly a mile, they finally managed to lose their pursuers. Fatty collapsed, gasping for air and wheezing that he couldn't take another step. He complained that Lin Hui hadn't helped him at all, despite the fact that he was lugging a heavy camera while nearly being decapitated by a flying roast chicken. Lin Hui was also breathing heavily, and it took a few moments for him to catch his breath and scan the surrounding mountain forest. He spotted a small wooden hut partially hidden in the trees and pointed it out, suggesting they rest there until dark before trying to head down the mountain. It was clear they couldn't leave just yet. Fatty hoisted the camera back onto his shoulder, and the two of them wound through the trees toward the shack. They soon realized it was just an abandoned, dilapidated house. Fatty looked around the hut, muttering about what kind of person would actually choose to live in such a place. He urged Lin Hui that they should leave as soon as it got dark, as the place felt incredibly eerie, and he suspected the livestream audience was already losing their minds. Lin Hui nodded, pushed open the door to inspect the interior, and finally found a spot to sit down and rest his weary bones. But as his gaze drifted toward an old iron pot in the corner, his system panel suddenly flickered to life. It detected a kitchen knife worth no less than 10,000 yuan. He squinted through the gloom and realized that there was, in fact, a blade stuck firmly into the ground. Only the handle of the kitchen knife was visible, with the entire blade buried deep in the dirt. Lin Hui approached, wondering how this rusty scrap could possibly be worth 10,000 yuan. He gripped the handle with both hands and yanked the knife out. Fatty leaned in with the camera, suggesting that even this piece of junk might be worth a few cents as scrap metal. Fatty joked that they had finally found some real trash to collect. Meanwhile, Lin Hui studied the reddish-brown soil clinging to the blade, and a sudden tremor took hold of his hands. He turned to Fatty, his voice shaking as he asked what that substance on the blade was. He couldn't help but wonder if it was actually blood. Fatty paused, then slowly leaned in to scrape off some of the mud. As he rubbed it between his fingers, he realized the red substance was still damp and hadn't fully dried yet. Fatty's face went pale, and just as he was about to pull Lin Hui away, soft footsteps echoed outside. A second later, the wooden door was pushed wide open. A middle-aged man with messy, unkempt hair stepped inside. For a long moment, everyone simply stared at one another in a state of complete and utter confusion. In a flash, the man grabbed a wooden club and swung it at them. Instinctively, Lin Hui raised the kitchen knife he was holding to ward off the man's sudden attack. In the livestream chat, the audience was losing their minds over this sudden turn of events. People were screaming in the comments, asking if anyone local could call the police. The situation had become genuinely terrifying. Many wondered how contestant number 3 could possibly be this unlucky, or perhaps this cursed. Of course, some viewers were thrilled by the chaos, claiming this was far more entertaining than watching someone actually pick through trash for a living. Behind the scenes, however, the production crew was in a total panic. They had been on edge ever since that second black plastic bag had been discovered the day before. They had only just begun to relax because Fatty hadn't captured anything too graphic on camera. To be honest, they were barely holding it together. But with a third bag appearing and the contestants now being chased, their anxiety spiked again. They lived in constant fear of the show being shut down by a scandal. They simply couldn't understand how one contestant could attract so much trouble. The staff watched the monitors intently, ready to cut the feed at a moment's notice. The director, Neo Dadon, took a deep breath and tried to calm his team. He insisted these were all just isolated incidents that wouldn't affect the filming. But as soon as he finished speaking, he turned away and secretly swallowed 2 blood pressure pills, which, naturally, tells you exactly how calm he actually was. Meanwhile, in the police station meeting room, Wang Jiangwo and his team were discussing the case, their eyes bloodshot from a lack of sleep. The lab reports had finally come back. Based on the current evidence, it seemed highly likely that the crime scene was the Hejia Cemetery on the outskirts of town. Wang Jiangwo gave the order for everyone to gear up, announcing they would move out in 5 minutes. And with that, the room erupted into a flurry of activity. As everyone sprang into action, Wang Jiangwo suddenly remembered something and called out to a young officer, asking if he had been keeping an eye on Lin Hui. He wanted to know exactly where they had gone after leaving the station earlier that day. Wang Jiangwo leaned in to look at the screen, where the camera was shaking violently. Clearly, Fatty was sprinting while hauling his heavy equipment. The lens was pointed backward, offering a blurry glimpse of a middle-aged man chasing them with a wooden club. Looking at the man's silhouette, Wang Jiangwo felt a jolt. The figure seemed to match their profile of the killer almost perfectly. With that realization, he tentatively asked if anyone could identify the location. The young officer scratched his head, then his eyes widened in shock. He told the captain that it looked like the Hejia Cemetery. They had been napping there in the afternoon, and the terrain suggested they were still in the area. Upon hearing this, Wang Jiangwo closed his eyes in weary disbelief. He remained silent for a full 30 seconds before finally waving his hand with a sigh, telling them to call the accountant from logistics. He told them to prepare the reward documents and join the team. Unless he was very much mistaken, the man chasing those 2 was indeed their killer. Meanwhile, in the woods behind the cemetery, total chaos had broken out. Their pursuer was relentless, chasing them for over half an hour without pause. Lin Hui panted heavily as he ran, wondering why the man was so persistent just because he'd been tapped once with the back of a knife. Behind him, Fatty was wheezing and screaming for Lin Hui to wait, claiming he was about to drop dead right there on the trail. Fatty begged him to show some heart and help carry the camera. Lin Hui hesitated, wondering if he should actually stop and help his friend. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed behind them. Both men stopped and turned to see an older woman holding a shovel, while the middle-aged man lay flat on the ground. She declared she had finally caught them, boasting that she used to be on the provincial sports team before demanding to know who stole her husband's offerings. Lin Hui stared at the fierce woman in stunned silence, sweat dripping down his forehead as he realized the gravity of the misunderstanding. He immediately pulled out 200 yuan and handed it over with both hands, explaining it was all a mistake and that they were just there to collect trash. He begged her to take the money to buy new offerings for the old man. By evening, a long line of vehicles had pulled up to the Hejia Cemetery entrance. Word of the case had spread. Not only was the security bureau there, but a swarm of media reporters had arrived, lugging their cameras into the cemetery. In the small woods behind the graves, Wang Jiangwo stood at the entrance of the shack, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. He stood there with an expression that was neither humble nor joyful. To be honest, Lin Hui was simply numb. It was confirmed that the middle-aged man was indeed their suspect. There was no need for a long interrogation. The man started crying and confessing the moment he saw the police, pleading only for that woman to stay away from him. After the scene was processed, Wang Jiangwo took a deep breath and walked over to our duo, looking utterly baffled as to why their scavenger hunt led them to a cemetery. He asked them what they expected to find there. Discarded urns, perhaps? Sensing the resentful glares of the other officers, Lin Hui wisely chose to keep his head down. Just as the tension became unbearable, a swarm of reporters carrying microphones suddenly rushed toward them, giving no one a chance to escape the spotlight. Before Wang Jiangwo could even react, microphones were shoved into his face as reporters began shouting questions about the brutal case that had gripped the city. They noted that while the higher-ups had given the police a week to solve the case, it had only been 2 days. They wanted to know his secret to such efficiency. The questions kept coming, with reporters asking if he could share the reasons behind this rapid breakthrough and if today's successful arrest was planned. They wondered if it was connected to the trash can operation from the previous night. Watching this, we see Wang Jiangwo's mouth twitching in silent frustration. He felt these reporters were aiming straight for the heart. After all, how could he possibly admit the case was solved because he ran into 2 scavengers? Taking another deep breath, Wang Jiangwo told them that since the investigation was still ongoing, it wasn't convenient to disclose any details just yet. Suddenly, a reporter in the crowd let out a soft cry of recognition and rushed toward Lin Hui with an expression of pure delight on her face. She identified him as contestant number 3, Lin Hui, and asked what he was doing there, wondering if he had stumbled upon another human fragment while scavenging. Lin Hui was caught off guard by the sudden attention, but before he could think of an answer, Fatty stepped forward to take charge of the situation. Addressing the microphones, Fatty introduced himself as Chun Yanhong, Lin Hui's personal cameraman, and told the press they could direct their questions to him. He boasted that he had recorded the entire encounter with the criminal and invited everyone to join their live stream to watch the high-definition replay of the action. Fatty didn't forget to give Lin Hui a quick wink. It was then that Lin Hui remembered that their livestream popularity was a key part of the competition's evaluation. With so many reporters present, this exposure was exactly what they needed to secure the championship. Naturally, the crowd abandoned Wang Jiangwo to swarm the duo. As the interview began, the data in the production team's backstage office started to explode, catching the staff completely by surprise. An assistant shouted for the director, reporting that the viewership for Room 3 had surged past 50,000 and was still climbing as Lin Hui's stream went viral. It had even hit the trending searches. Their show was officially a viral sensation. Neo Dayton stared at the backstage data in complete shock, never imagining that their small-budget production could achieve such results. He took a deep breath, feeling a mix of pain and joy. The pain, of course, came from the fact that the show's style had completely derailed. As for contestant number 3, instead of scrap, he was collecting every single bounty on the police department's list. The joy, however, was that the show was truly alive. He told his staff to contact Lin Hui and subtly remind him to actually find some scrap metal for a change. He couldn't keep stealing the police's jobs. Otherwise, the director feared he might end up being invited to the station for tea himself. Upon hearing Neo Dayton's words, the staff members couldn't help but chuckle. Meanwhile, back at the cemetery, we see Lin Hui under Wang Jiangwo's murderous gaze as he tremblingly accepted the 10,000 yuan reward, bringing this matter to a successful conclusion. The cemetery manager, who had been waiting nearby, warmly escorted our duo to the entrance. He told Lin Hui that if they weren't already on a show, he would insist on hiring them both. As spokesman for the cemetery, he explained that in just one afternoon, they had closed dozens of sales, which was quite a feat for a graveyard. He added that if they ever wanted to scavenge there again, the gates were always open. The manager's mood was, to put it mildly, absolutely wonderful. Today's sales volume alone was almost equal to an entire year's total. At the cemetery gate, the manager still held Lin Hui's hand, reluctant to let go. As he continued his chatter of praise, he mentioned he'd already had their photos taken to be posted at the entrance, so the security would recognize them and welcome them anytime. Seeing that the conversation was getting increasingly absurd, Lin Hui exchanged a few polite words and quickly pulled Fatty away without looking back. As the two walked slowly down the road, they were uncharacteristically quiet. Even though they had just earned a 10,000 yuan reward, neither felt like celebrating. Lin Hui had just received a warning from the production team stating he had strayed too far from the theme. He scratched his head in frustration, wondering where on earth they were supposed to find actual scrap now. Beside him, Fatty let out a heavy sigh. To be honest, after these past 2 days, he felt that catching criminals was far more interesting than picking up trash. It seemed they were simply unlucky enough to never find actual junk. Returning to the theme had become their biggest challenge, until Fatty's eyes suddenly lit up with an idea. He told Lin Hui he knew where to find scrap. His uncle worked at a landfill, and if they changed into the right clothes, they could sneak in. However, he warned that no one else could know, or his uncle might lose his job. And so, a new plan began to take shape. Upon hearing this, Lin Hui stared blankly at Fatty, his gaze shifting to the camera in the other man's hand as his mouth twitched uncontrollably. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Should he praise him for the genius idea of scavenging at a landfill, or for the sheer brilliance of shouting his secret plan out loud? At this rate, it wasn't just a third person who knew. Probably 30,000 people now knew that Fatty's uncle worked at the landfill. After all, they were still broadcasting live. Could the guy not be a bit more discreet? Lin Hui let out a long sigh and patted Fatty's shoulder, suggesting they go buy some sacks before the uncle got fired. They had to make the most of it while they could. Soon, the thin man and the stout one were seen rushing toward the landfill, carrying over 100 sacks on their shoulders. They moved with incredible speed. Meanwhile, at the Chengdu Waste Treatment Station, a group of sorters was looking at the morning's haul with utter confusion. It was as if they had seen a ghost. They wondered what on earth had happened in the city last night, as they had never seen trash. Looked so clean. There wasn't a single item inside that could be sold for money. One worker complained that he had been sorting for hours, without finding anything of value. Something was definitely wrong with today's trash. One of them turned to old Lu, asking if he didn't have a relative working as a cameraman for that scavenging show. He urged Lu to ask if they were the ones responsible for leaving the workers with no way to make a living. Old Lu nodded thoughtfully. Usually, the items they sorted out each day could be sold for a few dozen yuan, but today, everything had been picked clean. Just as old Lu was debating whether or not to call, the phone in his pocket began to ring. To be honest, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. He pulled out his phone and saw it was indeed his nephew. After the call, old Lu walked quickly to the landfill entrance to meet our duo. Seeing him arrive, Lin Hui and Fatty immediately handed over the fruit they had brought from the cemetery and explained their intentions. Having accepted the gift, the uncle was quite helpful. Since today's trash was empty anyway, he figured letting the two boys into scavenge wouldn't hurt, as long as the fruit was shared with the crew. That way, no one would complain. Soon, Lin Hui and Fatty changed into work clothes and began toiling in the landfill, while old Lu headed to the office. He warmly shared the fruit with his colleagues, but the pleasant atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by someone's startled cry. Back inside the landfill, Lin Hui and Fatty were crouching on a mountain of trash, staring at each other with miserable expressions. This place was so clean. It looked as if a dog had licked it. After half an hour, they hadn't found a single piece of scrap metal. Looking at the sacks that cost him 100 yuan, Lin Hui felt his composure slipping. Suddenly, Fatty slapped his forehead, realizing that the problem was likely the very trash they were currently digging through. It turned out the trash from last night had already been thoroughly picked over by the police, who spent the entire evening searching for evidence. They had likely taken everything of value. Hearing this, Lin Hui closed his eyes, realizing how reckless he'd been for not considering this sooner. To be honest, while Wang Zhengwo might struggle to find criminal evidence, he was surprisingly efficient at cleaning out a landfill. Lin Hui looked at Fatty with a sigh. He asked what they should do now, since they'd already given the fruit and bought the sacks. They couldn't exactly leave empty-handed. Fatty insisted they keep looking, arguing that a mountain of trash this size couldn't be completely empty, especially since his uncle usually ignored the smaller scraps. And so, our duo resigned themselves to their fate, picking up their small shovels to dig through the massive mountain of waste. Suddenly, we hear a sharp clink. Lin Hui's shovel had struck something metallic buried deep beneath the trash. Fatty immediately rushed over with the camera, his eyes lighting up with hope. He boasted that he knew his uncle's lazy habits well. The man would cut corners even on a bathroom break, so there were bound to be leftovers. They had finally found their first piece of scrap. Fatty's face was a mask of pure excitement as he stared intently at the edge of the shovel. Lin Hui felt a surge of motivation as well, digging away with renewed vigor. After all, scrap metal was worth far more than plastic bottles. Since it didn't come loose after a few shovelfuls, it was clearly a big one. Old Lu noticed them crouching at the base of the mountain and wandered over. Curiosity got the better of him as he watched them dig. When a rusty, pointed metal tip emerged from the small pit, he couldn't help but praise their luck. He remarked that the boys were quite fortunate, as this item had likely been buried long before the current trash mountain was even piled up. He encouraged them to keep digging, noting that the object seemed quite large. Having received an expert's validation, Lin Hui's expression grew even more excited. He felt certain this was a win, spitting on his hands and digging with even more force. As they worked, Fatty suddenly paused and looked down in confusion. He wondered aloud why the object seemed to have two wings. Lin Hui was equally puzzled, but old Lu, the resident expert, was becoming genuinely thrilled. In all his years of work, he had never seen anything like this unearthed. He told them to wait while he gathered more men to help dig the giant out. A short time later, old Lu returned with several colleagues. Armed with shovels, the group began excavating a massive pit at the base of the landfill. They worked with incredible speed, but once the head of the object was fully revealed, everyone froze in utter disbelief. It wasn't scrap metal at all. It was an oval-shaped warhead. Good grief, it was a bomb. And as we've seen before, Lin Hui's luck was taking another very strange turn. Old Lu muttered that they shouldn't have eaten those apples, as everyone knows how cursed this part of Chengdu can be. He shouted for everyone to scatter and stay far away. Someone yelled back, asking if he was crazy for climbing a utility pole. After all, if it exploded, he'd only fly higher. Seeing the warhead peeking out from the earth, the crowd was completely gripped by panic. Lin Hui pressed his lips together and hid behind a pole, feeling utterly stunned. He had hoped for scrap metal, not a literal bomb. The thing looked to be at least 2 meters long. To make matters worse, his system only decided to chime in after the head was unearthed. It was a bit late for a warning. They had nearly dug the whole thing out. Someone asked with a trembling voice what they should do now. They wondered if they should call the security bureau. Hearing this, Lin Hui slapped his forehead, his expression suddenly shifting to excitement. He urged them to call immediately, mentioning he had a contact there, specifically Captain Wang Jingwo. Someone quickly pulled out a phone. As the call was being made, Fatty leaned over and nudged his uncle, his face looking quite solemn and heavy with regret. He quietly asked his uncle if there were any of those apples left, perhaps sensing they might need some comfort soon. Meanwhile, the viewers in the live stream were reaching a fever pitch of excitement. They knew something big was coming. After watching 2 hours of trash picking, they had finally hit the jackpot. Some were cheering, while others were simply baffled. They questioned how a bomb could even be in a sorting facility. One viewer explained that these duds are surprisingly common in the country. He even claimed his father let him play on a dud bomb as a child. To be honest, it's a miracle some people survive to adulthood. The chat was already anticipating the look on Captain Wang's face when he realized these two were at it again. We returned to the Chengdu Security Bureau, where Wang Jingwo and his team had been working for 2 days and nights straight. They were exhausted to the point of needing to lean against the walls just to walk. Fortunately, the case was finally wrapping up. Wang Jingwo looked at his sleep-deprived team and clapped his hands, encouraging them to hold on for just a few more minutes. He promised they could rest after a quick summary. Though the process had been messy, the speed of the resolution had pleased the higher-ups. He announced that rotations for rest would start tomorrow, but just as he spoke, the meeting room door was suddenly flung open. A team member leaned against the doorframe and shouted to Wang Jingwo that Lin Hui had caused another massive scene at the sorting facility. Apparently, while picking through trash, they dug up a bomb. But that wasn't even the main issue. For some reason, they were holding a funeral for it. They had even lit incense. Wang Jingwo's blood pressure spiked instantly. Lighting incense for a bomb was hardly something a sane person would do. He roared at his team to notify the fire and bomb disposal units immediately, declaring that all vacations were officially canceled. They had to get to the sorting station now. In an instant, the entire security bureau became a hive of activity as police cars began to scramble. One by one, the sirens wailed as they sped out of the station. Old Man Chin, sitting by the entrance, poked his head out and stroked his chin. He muttered that those two boys would likely be back soon, so he might as well order some beef to have ready for their arrival. He planned to tell them about his legendary days guarding the girls' dormitory, a story that would surely leave them in absolute awe. As the old man dialed for takeout, we returned to the trash mountain where Lin Hui and Fatty stood before the nose of the bomb. They had placed 3 half-eaten apples as an offering and bowed with total sincerity. It was a sight to behold, really. Old Lu and the others watched with twitching lips, having never seen anyone worship a bomb. They wondered what the prayer was even for, a gentle explosion? One man turned to Old Lu and asked if his relatives had perhaps suffered some sort of childhood head injury involving a heavy door. Old Lu agreed that neither of them seemed normal. He had never seen anyone successfully scavenge items from a graveyard before. The man retorted that Old Lu shouldn't talk, as he had clearly seen him eating the most, specifically the natural causes and dyed young apples. It was a bizarre argument over cursed fruit, to say the very least. Amidst their bickering, the Security Bureau vehicles finally arrived. Wang Jingwo led his team forward at a brisk pace toward the group. However, the workers were stunned. These were definitely officers, but they all seemed to be wearing heavy, dark circles under their eyes. Old Lu remained silent for a few seconds before stepping forward to deliver a verbal blow, asking if they had just come from a giant panda convention. Wang Jingwo gritted his teeth, feeling utterly exhausted, and simply waved his hand as he walked toward the two troublemakers with his tired eyes. He stood before Lin Hui and Fatty, staring at them for a long time, but in the end, he only let out a heavy sigh without saying a word. The workers silently covered their mouths and cleared a path. Wang Jingwo led his team to the pit, where he promptly kicked away the 3 offering apples. Ignoring the fruit, he turned to his officers and ordered everyone into riot gear, reminding them to be careful as they cleared the surrounding mountains of trash. Before long, the bomb disposal and fire departments arrived, and the combined teams began the grueling task of excavating the massive pile of refuse. However, the bomb disposal experts soon noticed something quite strange. The Security Bureau officers had somehow found large sacks and were working with odd intensity. With a sack in one hand and a shovel in the other, they were constantly stuffing things away at a speed that was, frankly, a bit suspicious. The bomb disposal captain was stunned. His team were the professionals here, yet they were being completely outpaced by these frantic police officers. He barked at his men, asking why they were standing around while the others were working so hard, demanding they pick up the pace immediately. He refused to be outdone. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the sky, the entire mountain of trash had been cleared away. Looking down at the rusted, ancient bomb at the bottom of the pit, Wang Jingwo finally let out a long, relieved sigh that the excavation was over. He walked over to Lin Hui and Fatty, calmly telling them it was time to go, as the demolition experts would handle the rest of the dangerous work. He also mentioned the Bureau would provide a 10,000 yuan reward. Meanwhile, back at the studio, director Neo Daden woke up feeling like the sky was falling. He wondered if a live bomb was really appropriate for his show. He considered cutting the feed, but the skyrocketing viewership numbers were simply too tempting. Besides, he had no valid reason to disqualify them. Technically, a discarded bomb was still unclaimed property and fell under the category of scavenging. What truly bothered him was their income, 20,000 yuan in 2 days. Earning 10,000 a day by picking through trash was hardly the point of the show. If other contestants followed their lead, the program would be ruined. Neo Dayton was currently nursing a massive headache over the whole situation. We returned to the station, where after finishing the paperwork, Lin Hui and Fatty joined Old Man Sheen at the security booth for some beef. They sat and listened to the old man's tales of his legendary years guarding the girls' dormitory until an officer arrived with their reward money. The officer also handed over 2 bus tickets, a parting gift from Wang Jingwo. Standing at the entrance, the two of them waved a reluctant goodbye. Clutching the tickets, Lin Hui felt a strange mix of emotions about leaving a place that had become so lively. Fatty's lip twitched as he muttered a few choice words, eventually dragging Lin Hui away from the security bureau to continue their journey. And so, our 2 travelers finally made their way toward the bus station. Fatty pulled the tickets from his pocket, squinting at the details while wondering aloud how long they could sleep before arriving. He noted they were headed to Mo City, a journey of 128 hours, and told Lin Hui to rest easy. Upon hearing this, Lin Hui felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. A 5-day trip was practically sending them to the edge of the world. With the show only lasting 15 days, spending a third of that time on a bus was a direct threat to his earnings. He decided then and there that they couldn't go to Mo City. They had to get off the moment they cleared the city limits. Meanwhile, back at the security bureau, Wang Jingwo sat in his office on a phone call, looking quite pleased with himself. He was thanking an old classmate for ensuring the two had boarded, even jokingly asking if the bus doors could be welded shut. After hanging up with a satisfied grin, he celebrated the fact that he had finally, truly, gotten rid of them. He figured that by the time they even thought about coming back from Mo City, the program would already be over. But just as he was enjoying his clever plan, a knock at the door brought a staff member in with a new set of orders. The higher-ups had called, demanding the Chengdu Security Bureau cooperate with a special request regarding the outskirts of the city. It seemed the military had finished a 3-day exercise in the wildlands and wanted the Bureau to help clean up the battlefield. Wang Jingwo frowned, wondering why his officers were being assigned such a task, and asked if other bureaus were involved. The staff member hesitated, looking down, and slowly explained the rather awkward reality of the situation. Apparently, only their bureau was called because word had spread that they were professionals at clearing mountains of waste. At that moment, Wang Jingwo felt his composure shatter. Meanwhile, our duo was having their own struggle on the bus. After much arguing, they finally managed to get off at the very edge of the Chengdu border just as the bus pulled away. Lin Hui sighed in relief, telling Fatty he suspected the driver was a bureau informant who had tried to keep them trapped. He decided they should avoid the main roads entirely. After all, for professional scavengers, the wilderness held its own treasures. Besides, Lin Hui had no desire to endure 128 hours on a bus. It was simply too much. So, our 2 travelers shouldered their sacks and marched into the wilderness. As they entered the wildlands, the viewers in the livestream chat began to mock them, noting that these 2 certainly preferred the road less traveled. They wondered what could possibly be found out there, doubting any trash existed in such a place, and suggested a construction site would have been a much better choice. The viewers pointed to contestant number 1, who spent his morning helping at a site for free just to claim all the scrap metal and beer bottles at night. In a single evening, he could fill several sacks, a haul so good it made some viewers want to start scavenging themselves. But of course, no one earned like Lin Hui. One newcomer asked if this was the same Lin Hui who found the bomb, while another desperately sought his contact information for a rather personal reason. The viewer joked that Lin Hui must have a grudge against his family, given how he'd even snatch apples left at a grave site. He was truly desperate for a win. Meanwhile, we see Lin Hui and Fatty walking through the vast wilderness for over 2 hours until, exhausted, they finally stopped in a small grove to rest. Lin Hui asked Fatty to check the navigation to see how much further they had to go. Fatty pulled out his phone, but as he looked at the screen, his expression froze. Looking at the route, Fatty realized they were in trouble and lamented that he should never have listened to Lin Hui's plan in the first place. The wilderness was exactly that, a wasteland with absolutely no scrap to be found. Lin Hui stared at the map for a long time, realizing he might have been a bit hasty. However, going back was out of the question. He'd go anywhere but back to Chengdu. He patted Fatty's shoulder, insisting they keep moving forward. He told Fatty he simply couldn't believe such a vast area held no treasure. And just as the words left his mouth, a sudden humming sound echoed from the sky. Looking up, we see a small drone the size of a car wheel, trailing thick black smoke as it plummeted toward the trees directly above them. With a loud bang and a burst of sparks, the machine exploded, sending a rain of metal parts tumbling down to the ground right in front of them. Fatty stared at the debris in stunned silence for a long moment before asking Lin Hui if his mouth had been blessed by the gods. Lin Hui was equally speechless. Rubbing his nose awkwardly, Lin Hui tentatively asked if this counted as scrap. Since it was already blown apart, he figured picking it up wouldn't cause any trouble. A short while later, the two had gathered every single piece from the ground, even managing to salvage half a pound of copper after starting a small fire. Suddenly, Fatty let out a cry of surprise, holding the charred shell of the drone up to Lin Hui's face and telling him he needed to see this immediately. Lin Hui took the drone casing and looked down, his eyes landing on a small line of printed text that changed everything. The text read, Western Theater Command Reconnaissance Unit, drone serial number. Lin Hui swallowed hard, staring at the pile of charred wreckage with a growing sense of despair. A cold feeling spread through his chest. Although they hadn't shot the drone down, they were the ones who had burned the parts to extract the metal. Aside from the outer shell, every piece of plastic containing metal had been scorched clean. After a long silence, Fatty patted his shoulder and offered some rather grim comfort. He told Lin Hui not to worry, promising to visit him often once he was locked up. Apparently, destroying military property carried a sentence of about 3 years. Fatty even offered to visit once a month. Hearing this, Lin Hui completely panicked and snatched Fatty's phone right out of his hand. He decided to call the Chengdu Security Bureau immediately to explain it was an accident, hoping for some leniency. However, as he tried to call, the line remained busy no matter how many times he tried. Meanwhile, in the live stream, the chat was absolutely exploding with frantic comments. Viewers lamented that the show was ending just as it got good. Our protagonist was heading straight to prison without having successfully sold a single piece of scrap. One viewer asked if everyone else was busy calling the tip line, as they hadn't been able to get through to the authorities for ages. It seemed the entire audience was trying to report them at once. Backstage at the program, the director, Neo Dayton, slumped in his chair looking utterly defeated. As the man in charge, he knew he would be held responsible. He was certain he'd be spending some time behind bars himself. Numbly, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number, telling his wife to listen closely. He told her not to ask questions, but that he had hidden some emergency cash. He began listing the locations, starting with a hole under the toilet. He continued the list, under the floorboards beneath the bed, behind the ceiling panels in the living room, and inside the air conditioner on the balcony. He even mentioned a spot behind the neighbor's headboard. At the same time, Captain Wang Zhengwo was heading out with his team and their gear. Sitting in the car, he took 3 deep breaths to calm himself down. He tried to convince himself that being a talented scavenger was, in its own way, a skill. He figured he could just view it as a way to generate revenue for the department. But just as he regained his composure, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked the screen and saw a message from Fatty. It was an apology for the intrusion, followed by a very awkward question. Fatty explained they had found a drone and wondered if the security bureau wanted it, noting it belonged to the theater command and even had a serial number. Wang Zhengwo fell silent for several seconds before gritting his teeth and opening the livestream. With just one glance at the screen, he saw the truth. We see that the location in the livestream is the exact battlefield area the higher-ups ordered them to clear. Wang Zhengwo was utterly stunned. It wasn't even his own men yet. His troops had barely left the base, yet these two had already reached the high ground. He wondered if there was a mole in the bureau, because otherwise, why did this happen every time? Whether it was finding debris, catching criminals, or even cleaning up a battlefield, these two always got there first. To be honest, it was becoming a bit of a pattern. Wang Zhengwo began to sink into a state of deep suspicion. Meanwhile, out in the wild woods, Fatty looked at Lin Hui and tried to offer some comfort. He told Lin Hui not to worry, since Lin Hui was too afraid to call Captain Wang. Fatty had sent a message instead. Besides, the viewers were saying something interesting. Apparently, the military had conducted exercises here a few days ago. The drone was likely just leftover equipment, so there shouldn't be any real trouble. Hearing this, Lin Hui snatched Fatty's phone and saw a viewer named Grandpa Chin the doorman posting several comments in a row. The man claimed the drone was just exercise scrap and that as long as they didn't sell it privately, they were fine. In fact, they could even turn it in for a reward. The higher the recovery value, the bigger the reward would be. Lin Hui looked closer at the user's profile picture and realized it was a photo of the security bureau's trash can. This was indeed Grandpa Chin, the security guard at the bureau. If he was the one saying it, then the plan was surely solid. Lin Hui breathed a sigh of relief as a bold idea began to form. He looked up at Fatty with a sudden spark of excitement, announcing they had real work to do. After that, he led Fatty deeper into the wilderness. The two of them walked along, raking the ground as they went, desperately trying to unearth something else. An entire hour passed without them finding so much as a scrap of plastic. However, there was one unintended benefit to their hard labor. The soil they had raked over was so well-tilled that it looked ready for planting crops after the next rain. Strangely, the system hadn't given Lin Hui a single hint. He wondered if it was broken. Feeling discouraged, he slammed his rake into the ground, only for a loud clang to vibrate through his hands until they went numb. Fatty turned around and stared in shock at the deformed rake. He gave Lin Hui a long, searching look and asked him to be honest for once. He asked if Lin Hui was hiding some kind of metal detector on his body. Without waiting for an answer, Fatty knelt down and started digging with his small shovel. Lin Hui knelt down to watch, and before long, he pulled a spherical object out of the dirt. Fatty couldn't help but let out a startled cry. It was a grenade. Lin Hui swallowed hard, having never expected to pull a perfectly intact explosive out of the mud. He wondered why such a thing was buried here in the middle of nowhere. After all, if a random passerby or a criminal found it, the consequences would be dire. If that were the case, wouldn't they be in massive trouble? Lin Hui quickly stuffed the item into a sack and looked at Fatty, urging him to keep digging. It seemed there was more beneath the surface. Lin Hui lay flat on the ground, carefully clawing at the dirt pit, and Fatty followed suit with equal intensity. After half an hour, we see them unearth dozens of grenades, all perfectly intact and ready to blow. Naturally, the livestream audience was losing their minds. People in the chat were stunned, wondering if these were just movie props. But others argued that was impossible, reminding everyone about the recent military exercises. This wilderness was a former drill site, so these were definitely the real deal. Some viewers even started jokingly asking Lin Hui to hold a few up for the camera. They wanted a closer look at the explosives, as they had never seen a real grenade before. The audience's enthusiasm was reaching a fever pitch. After all, it isn't every day you get to watch a live battlefield cleanup on the internet. Soon, more people flooded in, and the viewership numbers began to skyrocket. The count quickly surpassed a staggering 500,000 viewers. This, however, was terrible news for Wang Zhengwo, who just received a call from his superiors. The zone commanders wanted to know why 2 random scavengers were cleaning the battlefield on a public livestream instead of the actual recovery team. Wang Zhengwo was so anxious, he didn't even know how to explain himself. He could only urge his driver to go faster, hoping to reach the outskirts of Chengdu in time. Meanwhile, at a large landfill on the other side of the city, other contestants noticed their viewers were mysteriously vanishing. They soon discovered the reason. It turned out their fans had all migrated to stream number 3. The other contestants couldn't sit still once they saw what was happening. How could picking through trash compete with unearthing grenades? One contestant gritted his teeth and shouted that he knew exactly where that field was. It was near his home village, and since winning the championship seemed impossible now, he figured finding a few shell casings would be more profitable than staying here. He asked if anyone wanted to join him, and the response was unanimous. In less than a minute, the landfill was almost entirely deserted. Not only did the contestants leave, but they even pooled their earnings from the past few days to save time. To be honest, their desperation was almost impressive. They hired a garbage truck and went roaring toward the outskirts. The local scavengers, seeing the commotion, assumed a better treasure trove had been found. They grabbed their tools and followed the truck like a swarm of bees. Along the way, every professional scavenger they passed joined the growing procession. Back at the production office, Neo Dandan had finished packing his bags, ready to turn himself into the police. He was hoping for a bit of leniency. But just as he was about to leave, his office door was kicked open. His assistant screamed for him to come out, shouting that something massive had happened. The internet was buzzing with news that the field where Lin Hui found the drone was an old drill site. It was already scheduled for a cleanup, and now everyone was heading there. Every contestant was racing to the wilderness, and word was the security bureau was on their way too. Apparently, every single rake in the local supermarkets had already been sold out. Neo Dandan froze in his tracks. If the security bureau was involved, then this wasn't a crime after all, which meant, to his immense relief, that he was actually in the clear. But he couldn't help but wonder what was happening with the contestants. He rushed out with his staff and saw the backstage monitors showing a truly bizarre scene. Aside from a few stragglers still picking through construction trash, the rest of the contestants were piled onto a single garbage truck. Even more shocking was the crowd behind them. A massive procession of hundreds followed, young and old, men and women. They looked incredibly professional, with sacks tied to their waists and tools gripped firmly in their hands. With shovels in their left hands and rakes in their right, they were sprinting after the truck with everything they had. Neo Dandan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the sight. The good news was that he wasn't going to jail. The bad news was that his show was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, as night fell over the wilderness, we see Lin Hui and Fatty still wandering the dark fields, dragging a half-full sack of grenades. Suddenly, Lin Hui spotted a faint red glimmer just ahead of them. Before he could even celebrate the find, a sharp click echoed through the air. Fatty had already stepped right on it, prompting Lin Hui to shout for him to freeze. Fatty stopped dead in his tracks, trembling. Lin Hui leaned in cautiously to check the system's notification, which indicated that a high-value item was buried right beneath them. The system suggested the reward was worth at least 1,000 yuan, but Lin Hui broke into a cold sweat. To be honest, that much money usually meant a lot of danger. Ever since his system activated, any item with a high-value prompt had been anything but normal, usually fragments or highly explosive materials. This time was likely no exception. Fatty was absolutely terrified by Lin Hui's reaction. He stammered, asking if it was a landmine and if there was still any chance for him to run for his life. Lin Hui pursed his lips and looked at Fatty with genuine pity. He told him that running was no longer an option, and then asked if he had any last words. Fatty's legs began to shake violently. After a moment of hesitation, he handed the camera to Lin Hui and began to wail about his miserable luck in life. He cried that his mother always said he was born under a bad star, never even getting a hot meal at a wedding. Then, he looked at Lin Hui with a desperate request. He asked if they could get food delivered to the middle of nowhere, specifically 2 pounds of pork trotters. It was a strange request, but hunger does strange things to a man. They had been working all day, and he hadn't even had dinner yet. Lin Hui took a step back, waving his hand to calm his friend down while offering a bit of comfort. He told Fatty to stop howling and spotted a large rock nearby to use as a weight. Since this was a drill site, he hoped it might just be a harmless prop. As they were speaking, Fatty's phone suddenly began to ring in his pocket. Lin Hui reached over, pulled it out, and saw that Wang Jingwo was calling. Wang's voice crackled through the line, urgently telling Lin Hui that Chen Yanhong, our dear Fatty, must not move a single muscle. The mine beneath his foot wasn't for practice. He explained that he had checked with the authorities, and no landmines were used in this specific drill. This was likely a lethal relic left over from long ago. He warned them again not to move, promising they were nearby and would arrive any second. Wang Jingwo rattled off the instructions like a machine gun before hanging up. The message was clear. Lin Hui had to keep Fatty perfectly still. But just as he was about to relay the warning, Fatty spoke up with a look of pure agony. He whimpered that his stomach was in knots, and he couldn't hold it in much longer. Meanwhile, at the edge of the vast wilderness, a dozen security bureau vehicles pulled over. Wang Jingwo leaped from his car and stood before his team to announce their mission. He declared that the operation was officially underway. The first squad was ordered to begin a carpet search immediately, focusing on collecting scattered shell casings. The second squad was to use the vehicles. Their goal was to recover larger pieces of damaged weaponry. But most importantly, they were told to keep a constant eye on Lin Hui's livestream. While those two were pinned down by the landmine, the team had to finish cleaning the entire battlefield as quickly as possible. It was a race against time. He reassured them that the military had confirmed these specific mines were filled with flour, completely harmless. Or so he claimed to his men. With the order given, everyone nodded in unison and charged into the wilderness in their respective squads. The hunt for scrap metal was on. Watching them go, Wang Jingwo nodded with satisfaction and pulled out his phone again to call Lin Hui. He put on his best apologetic voice. He lied through his teeth, claiming their car was stuck in a roadside ditch. He told them not to worry, as a repair crew had already been summoned. He estimated they would be there in 3 hours at the earliest, urging the two friends to just hang in there a little longer. To be honest, his acting was quite convincing. But with Wang Jingwo nowhere in sight, Lin Hui grew suspicious. He took Fatty's phone and opened the livestream chat, only to be met with a shocking revelation. He was so angry he could practically see smoke. The viewers were screaming for him to look at the comments, explaining that Captain Wang had completely played them. The fans pointed out that the Bureau had already cleared a huge area, intentionally bypassing their location. They were certain the mine was a total fake. The chat warned them not to blame the captain too much, as the massive army of scavengers was also closing in. The competition was becoming fierce. They urged Lin Hui to just dig the thing up and get back to work. If they waited any longer, there wouldn't be a single piece of scrap left for them. Seeing those comments, Lin Hui quickly knelt down and cleared the soil from around Fatty's feet, revealing a rusted landmine that looked surprisingly fierce. It looked so authentic that he began to hesitate, but Fatty couldn't wait another second, begging his friend to hurry before he physically exploded. Lin Hui agreed to count down from 3 so Fatty could make a run for it, moving himself a safe distance away to begin the sequence. As the countdown reached 1, Fatty bolted like a lightning bolt, running with such speed that he seemed to leave an afterimage behind him. Clutching his backside, Fatty vanished behind a tree in an instant, just as the landmine on the ground suddenly began to spark and hiss. Lin Hui immediately dove to the ground and covered his head, hearing a sharp pop before looking up to see something quite unexpected. A brilliant firework blossomed in the sky, leaving him utterly stunned at the absurdity of someone disguising a firework as a lethal landmine. It made sense, though, as the system had only valued it at 1,000 yuan, while the livestream viewers erupted in fits of laughter. No one expected the thing that had pinned Fatty down for 3 hours to be a mere firework, though its realistic design was truly terrifying. Some viewers recalled an old firework factory that produced these years ago, though they were quickly discontinued for being far too realistic. Nearby, Wang Jingwo was busy cleaning the battlefield with his sacks when he saw the firework and came jogging over with his team. He asked what was going on, feigning confusion as to why they were setting off fireworks when he had told them not to move. Lin Hui glanced at the sacks behind the captain, which were stuffed full of his potential scrap metal, and grit his teeth in frustration. He pulled out his own half-bag of grenades and rubbed his fingers together in that universal gesture for payment that we all know so well. Wang Jingwo's face twitched, knowing his trickery today wasn't his finest hour, so he ordered his men to pay out a 10,000 yuan reward. The security officers watched Lin Hui count the cash with very complicated feelings, wondering what kind of strange reality they were living in. It was as if he were collecting a daily salary from their bureau, and after pocketing the cash, Lin Hui handed it over to Fatty. He thanked Captain Wang for his hard work and prepared to leave, but he suddenly froze in place, his eyes locked on a nearby pit. Fatty, having worked with him for so long, didn't need a single word to understand. He grabbed the shovel and charged toward the slope. Lin Hui followed close behind and began digging with all his might, not even waiting for Wang Jingwo and his men to react. A black bomb casing began to emerge from the steep slope, and we see Lin Hui and Fatty shouting with excitement that such a large bomb must be worth 10,000 yuan. He called out to Captain Wang to come and see if this thing was truly worth the price, but in the brief moment they were speaking, other contestants arrived. The scavenger brigade also descended upon the field, and the entire scene descended into absolute chaos as Wang Jingwo watched the crowd surge forward. The captain sat down on a bomb, completely stunned, unable to fathom where all these people had come from or which spy had leaked the information. Seeing him dazed, a team member reminded him that if they didn't act now, there wouldn't even be a blade of grass left on the ground, let alone bullet shells. Hearing this, Wang Jingwo snapped back to reality, stood up instantly, and roared at his men to take immediate action. He told them to ignore the others and keep a tight eye on Lin Hui, ordering them to scavenge exactly where that lucky young man chose to dig. At those words, the officers swarmed around Lin Hui like a hive of bees, and even the scavenger brigade behind them began to push and shove. Lin Hui's mouth twitched as he wondered how he was supposed to find anything with so many eyes on him, begging them to let him go and put him down. He shouted at the top of his lungs in the middle of the crowd, as they were squeezing him so hard his feet weren't even touching the ground anymore. He realized the battlefield cleanup was a lost cause. He could handle many things, but he truly couldn't compete with the local aunties in a scramble. Those ladies charged in like tanks before he could even spot an item, so he leaned on Fatty and moved to the side to watch the frantic crowd. Fatty asked what they should do now and suggested they just leave, but Lin Hui shook his head and secretly pointed toward a small hill nearby. The system had just given him a notification for a reward of no less than 100,000 yuan, though he felt a bit conflicted about it. Until now, the highest reward hint had been 10,000, which led to a massive bomb. He wondered what on earth a 100,000 yuan item could be. To be honest, he was a little afraid, but his curiosity had reached its peak, and the prize was sitting right there in front of him. He grit his teeth, gripped his rake and shovel, and told Fatty to grab the sacks because it was time for some serious work. Without looking back, he led Fatty toward the distant hill, where the two of them began huffing and puffing as they dug into the base of the slope. This scene left everyone dumbfounded, and they weren't sure if they should follow and help dismantle a literal mountain. They wondered why these two were digging up a hill instead of cleaning the battlefield, yet they couldn't help but suspect something valuable was hidden inside. One of the onlookers remarked that since he lived in a nearby village, he knew that hill was barren and nothing could grow there. He suspected Lin Hui had already made enough money and was just fooling everyone. The crowd whispered amongst themselves as they watched the pair dig fruitlessly. Seeing that nothing was being unearthed, the crowd relaxed and returned to scavenging the field, while Lin Hui and Fatty kept working in silence. After a long while, Fatty began to lose heart, asking how long they were supposed to keep digging at such a massive hill. He worried their two small shovels wouldn't finish the job until the end of time, but his complaint stopped mid-sentence as his eyes widened. In a state of pure shock, he let out a series of muffled shouts, forcing Lin Hui to rush over and cover his mouth while checking their surroundings. Noticing the scavenger brigade had moved far away, Lin Hui breathed a sigh of relief and hissed at Fatty to keep his voice down. He told Fatty to hold him steady while he pulled the object out, warning him to block the camera so the animals in the field wouldn't come charging back. If they saw this, they'd likely level the entire mountain overnight. Fatty finally snapped out of his daze and nodded frantically while helping. His shock turned into pure joy as he declared that he would follow Lin Hui forever, regardless of whether they won the competition or not. He even suggested they start their own scavenging company to strike it rich, but Lin Hui was far too busy to listen to his ramblings. With a final burst of effort, he pulled a small bronze tripod out of the dirt. Seeing the artifact, Fatty immediately covered his own mouth to stop a scream. Even Lin Hui could hardly hide his excitement, staring at the object for a long time before finally regaining his composure. He reached into Fatty's pocket for a phone and called Captain Wang, greeting him with a laugh and asking if he was busy. He explained that although he had stepped away from the battlefield cleanup, he had decided to help the villagers clear a path through the hill. He jokingly told the captain that he had accidentally dug up a bronze tripod, laughing at how unlucky it was to find such a thing. When the captain remained silent on the other end, Lin Hui wondered if the line had gone dead, but Wang Jingwo had simply hung up to rush over. A short while later, the captain arrived in a whirlwind, standing frozen as he stared at the knee-high bronze tripod sitting next to the two men. He walked up to Lin Hui and sighed, remarking that being a simple scavenger was a waste of such incredible talent. He even joked that Lin Hui should take his shovel to his family's ancestral graves. Perhaps he'd accidentally bring the dead back to life. Standing nearby, Fatty grinned widely at Wang Jingwo, chuckling as he told the captain to stop searching Lin Hui for hidden gadgets. He joked that he'd already patted Lin Hui down when they found the bomb and found no detector. He just wanted to know the reward amount. Wang Jingwo, knowing the gravity of finding cultural relics, immediately called the bureau. An hour later, the experts arrived in a hurry. Without a word, the bureau staff pulled out professional instruments and began their inspection while we watched the scene unfold with bated breath. The head of the bureau, Wang Bo, finally stood up and told the young men they had done a great service with this find. He explained the bronze tripod likely dated back to the Warring States period and was priceless, promising a reward of at least 100,000 yuan. Hearing that figure, Lin Hui and Fatty were overjoyed, but Lin Hui noticed something even more important as he looked back at the hill. The red glow covering the small mountain hadn't faded at all, suggesting the bronze tripod wasn't the only treasure hidden beneath the soil. While the others were busy transporting the artifact, Lin Hui picked up his shovel and headed toward the back of the hill, leaving everyone stunned. The bureau staff whispered among themselves, wondering if the young man had lost his mind. Finding one treasure was already a miracle. They remarked that relics weren't exactly like wild vegetables that you could just pick at will, yet Wang Jingwo remained thoughtful. The captain looked at Wang Bo and tentatively asked if there might be an ancient tomb hidden underneath the earth. Wang Bo was dismissive, stating their detectors had already scanned the entire hill and found no reactions. A tomb was simply impossible. He spoke with absolute certainty, convinced that the science of his machines was far more reliable than a scavenger's intuition. The bureau team eventually left with the tripod, but Wang Jingwo lingered, feeling deep down that the show wasn't over just yet. However, after a long silence with no movement, the captain felt he had miscalculated and began calling his men to pack up. Suddenly, Fatty let out a startled cry. The captain rushed over with his team to find Lin Hui standing in a fresh pit. He was lifting out a wooden chest encrusted with various gemstones, a sight that left Wang Jingwo completely speechless. To be honest, finding something after the expert said there was nothing was a feat that demanded respect. He reached for his phone again. Before long, the bureau's van came screeching back, and a grinning Wang Jingwo greeted them, noting the chest hadn't even been opened yet. Wang Jingwo joked that the bureau should offer another reward, since they'd been called twice now, hoping Wang Bo wouldn't be stingy. Wang Bo looked utterly dazed, wondering how his sensors missed this, and rushed forward to inspect the chest, and what a find it was. It was made of Phoebe Jinan wood, encrusted with gems and imperial jade. If the exterior was this valuable, what lay inside? After a careful inspection, they cautiously pried the chest open to reveal several perfectly preserved ancient manuscripts. The bureau staff's eyes lit up instantly, recognizing these as the true priceless treasures, and the group remained breathless for a long time. Once the excitement finally settled, Wang Bo looked at Lin Hui with a complex expression and offered him a job on the spot. He was being entirely sincere. To him, Lin Hui's intuition was far more reliable than any high-tech detection equipment the bureau owned. However, Lin Hui simply waved it off, explaining that he wasn't cut out for office work and preferred the freedom of scavenging. He was more interested in the reward amount, as he was still busy digging, but Wang Bo's tone suddenly shifted to something more formal. With a hint of apology, he explained that by regulation, finding 2 artifacts meant they had to cordon off the entire site for inspection. Lin Hui was stunned by the news. He had been planning on a major haul, and now his digging was being cut short. But seeing Wang Bo's apologetic face, he could only nod, telling himself he'd just come back and finish the job once they left. It was a minor setback, or so he thought. He would just have to wait for his moment. Fatty tried to cheer him up, noting that their prize money should be more than enough to win the scavenging competition anyway. He suggested they go back to cleaning the battlefield for smaller scraps, but Lin Hui didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the hill. His expression turned strange as we see the red glow on the mountain beginning to move at a visible speed. Before long, the glow actually traveled right to the large tree where they were standing, leaving Lin Hui questioning his own system. He wondered if an artifact could actually move on its own, or if there was something alive, perhaps a mythical beast, hidden beneath them. With that startling thought in mind, he immediately called out to Fatty to get ready. As Wang Bo and his team were busy directing the sensors, they looked up to see Lin Hui and Fatty frantically digging away at the base of the large tree. The entire group froze in confusion, wondering what on earth they were doing. Were they trying to tunnel their way back to the hill to find more artifacts? To be honest, if they were going to do something so suspicious, they should have at least tried to be discreet, but Wang Jingwo just watched with a delighted grin. He was enjoying this immensely, remembering how his own security bureau had been outplayed before. He was now certain the hill was empty and the real prize was under that tree. This was a lesson he had learned through bitter experience, so he turned to Wang Bo with a smirk, suggesting that sometimes one simply has to accept fate. He advised the director that if he wanted to save face, he should send his men over to the tree to help dig, as there might still be some credit left to share. Wang Jingwo told him to think it over carefully, then walked toward the tree with his hands behind his back, looking like a man who knew a very deep secret. He peered down into the hole and remarked that Lin Hui had certainly become an expert, having managed to dig such a deep pit in such a short amount of time. Lin Hui, gasping for breath, simply waved a hand at Wang Jingwo as a silent greeting before lowering his head to continue the grueling work. The roots beneath the tree were a tangled mess, making progress slow, but fortunately, the red glow from his system had finally stopped moving. This confirmed that something was definitely down there, while the viewers in the livestream were already beyond stunned by the sheer persistence on display. Some joked that if Lin Hui dug up a mythical gourd at this point, they would believe it. The man was truly opening their eyes to the impossible. Others wondered if he possessed some kind of golden-eye ability, as his luck seemed far too uncanny to be mere coincidence. Meanwhile, Wang Jingwo watched the digging with a satisfied heart, thinking it was finally the Cultural Relics Bureau's turn to feel the frustration, until a sudden thud echoed. The bottom of the pit unexpectedly collapsed, revealing a dark tunnel, and a startled Wang Zhangwo immediately shouted for help, fearing an accident. Several team members rushed over at the call, and even the staff from the Cultural Relics Bureau, including Wang Bo, hurried to the scene in a state of high excitement. Based on his experience, finding artifacts on the hill and a hidden tunnel under the tree could only mean one thing, and it didn't take a genius to figure it out. It was almost certainly a robber's tunnel, suggesting a major tomb lay hidden within the hill, but as they prepared a rescue, a shout echoed from below. Lin Hui roared for Fatty to throw down his rake, warning that there were several people down there, actual grave robbers, and they were armed. The people above froze in their tracks, including the bureau staff who had been just about to climb down into what they thought was a simple archaeological find. The entire group took a synchronized step back, only to see a stout figure clutching a camera jump headfirst into the pit without a single backward glance. A heavy thud echoed from below, leaving everyone stunned. After a moment of shock, Wang Zhangwo turned to his team and roared for them to stop standing around. He asked if they hadn't heard the shouting and ordered them down to save the others, before leaping into the dark pit himself. Inside, we find Lin Hui sitting atop a grave robber he had flattened, raining down punches with a ferocity born from a very genuine fright. The moment he had fallen, he unexpectedly saw several men crouching there with weapons, and realizing the danger, he had immediately shouted a warning. Hearing the commotion, the panicked robbers began to retreat, abandoning their own comrade, just as Fatty scrambled up from the ground nearby. Fatty's first priority, naturally, was to steady his camera, telling Lin Hui that it was too dark and he needed to lift his head up. He worried that if the screen stayed black, the production team might dock his pay, a comment that left Lin Hui momentarily speechless at the absurdity. With a sigh at Fatty's dedication to the shot, Lin Hui grabbed him and gave chase, as he had clearly seen the red glow of artifacts on those men. He wasn't about to let those treasures get away. Meanwhile, deep in the tunnel, the lead robber was crawling forward with surprising speed. One of his accomplices, struggling to keep up, begged the boss to stop just crawling and actually look at where they were going. He questioned if this was even the path they came in on, fearing they might get cornered while being pursued by the man behind them. He was certain their pursuer was a professional, noting how those heavy punches had sent their friend Gooden's teeth flying right into his face. The lead robber frowned, and after a brief internal struggle, he whispered for them to be quiet and follow him, insisting he wouldn't be wrong. He claimed to know a secret path that most people were unaware of, which he was sure would lead them to safety. The other robbers were stunned by this revelation of a hidden escape route, but in their current desperation, no one dared to question it. Soon, the group reached a stone door, which the leader pushed open before leading his men through the narrow gap and into the dark. Back at the production headquarters, the show's ratings were trending toward record-breaking heights, though the situation had become quite unusual. What started as a professional observation program had somehow turned into a live tomb-robbing broadcast, leaving director Neo Dayton slumped in his chair in silence. A concerned staff member asked if he was all right, but Neo Dayton simply waved a hand and let out a long, weary sigh. With a weary breath, Neo Dayton told the staff not to call him, as he simply wanted some peace. The staff member nodded and quietly backed out of the room. A moment later, the cleaning lady pushed open the door with a blush, whispering that she had heard the director was looking for her specifically. Neo Dayton turned to see the shyly smiling woman and felt his mind start to fracture, wondering if the world had truly gone mad or if it was just him. Meanwhile, we returned to Lin Hui and Fatty, who had been picking up dropped items along the way, only to realize they had somehow lost the trail. Lin Hui hunched over at the end of the tunnel, scratching his head in confusion as he wondered where on earth those men could have vanished to. They had clearly been following the robber's path, yet the group had disappeared into thin air, leaving Lin Hui quite puzzled by the sudden silence. Suddenly, Fatty called out, asking Lin Hui to come over and check out a stone slab that looked suspiciously like a hidden door. The two of them huddled together to examine the slab, reasoning that since their targets were grave robbers, there was likely a tomb right behind it. Feeling a surge of excitement, Lin Hui told Fatty to get ready and follow his lead once they stepped inside the unknown darkness. He reminded Fatty of their primary mission, to which Fatty tentatively replied that they were there to, well, collect scraps. Lin Hui confirmed this logic. If there were artifacts inside, they were simply scraps for them to find, and Fatty nodded in solemn agreement. The two of them pushed the stone slab aside and squeezed through, entering a pitch-black burial chamber lit only by the faint glow of a phone. As the light swept across the room, it became clear that many items had already been taken, leaving the chamber looking rather ransacked. Lin Hui began stuffing the remaining artifacts into his bag, grumbling that those robbers must have visited this place many times before. He felt a spark of indignation that their scraps were being stolen and decided they absolutely had to track those men down immediately. Following the faint footprints on the floor, he moved forward cautiously while Fatty trailed behind, constantly adjusting his camera for the best shot. The situation inside was captured with perfect clarity. After all, if you love your work, you must do it right. Meanwhile, Wang Zhangwo led several of his men forward. Looking up at the open stone slab, Wang Zhangwo felt his heart sink as he realized there truly was an ancient tomb beneath this hill. He felt a sudden urge to drag Wang Bo down here and ask how the Bureau's sensors had failed to detect such a massive structure multiple times. He turned to his team and ordered them to stay alert, warning them that the grave robbers were likely still somewhere nearby. Wang Jiangwo ordered his men to load their weapons and be ready for anything, but then he noticed one subordinate's questionable choice. He asked if the boy was crazy for pulling out a grenade in a tomb, unless he wanted to host their funerals right then and there. After the lecture, Wang Jiangwo led his team into the depths, while we returned to Lin Hui and Fatty following footprints to a burial chamber. They ducked behind a large coffin to observe the area, unaware that just a short distance away, the grave robbers were doing the exact same thing. The thieves watched Lin Hui and Fatty nervously, whispering to their leader to hurry up and find the exit before they were caught. They were worried that their firepower wouldn't be enough to handle the two newcomers, who seemed far too intense for comfort. The robbers were convinced these were elite agents sent by the Security Bureau, especially Fatty, who was filming them even in this high-stakes moment. Their leader, however, was lost in thought, staring at the familiar surroundings and trying to remember the secret mechanism his grandfather once showed him. To be honest, he was still in diapers back then, so his memory of the hidden gears was understandably a bit hazy. He had planned a simple heist followed by a quick escape across the fields, never expecting the Security Bureau to appear out of nowhere. He was struck by how professional these agents were, chasing them while simultaneously securing artifacts in sacks to protect the site. He couldn't fathom how the Bureau had trained people to film, protect cultural relics, and corner criminals all at the same time. Feeling completely overwhelmed, the leader gritted his teeth and pointed toward a distant lampstand, identifying it as the likely trigger. He told a young man named Gowa to go and test it, and the boy immediately scrambled toward the lampstand to try his luck. Just then, the leader saw the officer with the camera standing up, and in a moment of pure panic, he lost his cool. He screamed for suppressive fire, prompting the robbers to leap from behind the coffins and raise their weapons with desperate resolve. They surrounded Lin Hui and Fatty and pulled their triggers, only for a series of synchronized water jets to spray out instead of bullets. Lin Hui stood there in total disbelief, wiping the water from his face and wondering what kind of bizarre comedy troupe he had stumbled upon. It seems they didn't have real weapons and decided that water guns were a viable alternative, an embarrassing choice, to say the least. Time seemed to freeze as both sides stood there in awkward silence, until one robber finally muttered that he had warned them about the lack of firepower. We see the ceiling begin to tremble as the stone pillars above the tomb start to tilt, all because of the mechanism the young man just triggered. The boy, Gowa, cried out in terror, asking his boss what on earth he had just made him turn, as this clearly wasn't an exit. To be honest, it looked more like a mechanism designed to send them all to the afterlife, and even the leader was stunned as debris began to fall. With dirt raining down, the leader panicked and shouted for everyone to run and find cover, spotting a stone platform nearby that offered some hope. The group looked around and saw a waist-high stone platform with a hollow space underneath, seemingly large enough to shield several people. Realizing they had no other choice, the grave robbers swarmed into the cramped space, pushing and shoving one another to get as far back as possible. Once they were tucked away, the leader wondered aloud if those two agents had been crushed outside, but he had barely finished his sentence when reality struck. A sudden gust of wind preceded a sharp shove as Lin Hui leaned in with a cold expression, asking exactly who the leader thought was dead. He then told the robber at the very back to scoot over and make some room, insisting that everyone needed to squeeze in together in such a tight spot. The thieves suddenly became quite well-behaved, reluctantly shifting their bodies as Lin Hui pulled Fatty into the shelter, making the air beneath the slab rather awkward. One moment they were mortal enemies, and the next they were huddled together like a big, unhappy family, unable to even look away from each other. It was a situation so cringeworthy that if they weren't in a tomb, they could have died of embarrassment right then and there. Sensing the tension, Lin Hui scratched his head and decided to break the silence, telling them not to misunderstand. They weren't officers, just simple scavengers. He warned them, however, that the Real Security Bureau was indeed outside, so escape was impossible, and he needed them to act as witnesses. He wanted them to testify that everything he had collected was just junk, a claim that made the robbers turn their gaze toward Fatty's heavy sack. The bag was stuffed to the brim, emitting the distinct clinking sound of ancient porcelain, causing the thieves to swallow hard in disbelief. They couldn't believe this man was calling priceless cultural relics junk, while Lin Hui grew impatient at their stunned silence. He instructed them that when the authorities arrived, they should admit to grave robbing, but insist that he and Fatty were merely picking up trash. If asked where the items in the bag came from, they were simply to say they were found on the ground, a plan the robbers nodded to in a daze. One of them, looking conflicted, finally spoke up to suggest another detail. Perhaps they should mention the tomb is about to collapse on them. The robber suggested that if they claimed to have stepped up to protect the relics, the Security Bureau might not only forgive them, but perhaps even commend them. He pleaded with Lin Hui to put in a good word for them since they were first-time offenders, a request that made the young man's eyes light up. Lin Hui hadn't expected to find such talent among a group of thieves, so he nodded and assured them he had connections who could help. He even promised to make sure they were well fed behind bars, before casually suggesting they hand over any other fun items they were hiding. He warned that it would be quite troublesome if the guards found anything on them, prompting the group to hurriedly pull out every hidden relic. Lin Hui held the sack open and tucked every piece inside, just as voices began to echo from the entrance of the tomb. We see the experts from the Cultural Relics Bureau rush into the chamber, only to be met with a sight that left them utterly disappointed. The tomb was spotlessly clean, with even the stone slabs inside the coffin wiped down, while Fatty stood nearby dragging a very heavy, clinking sack. Wang Bo sighed in resignation, realizing that the rewards they would have to pay out this time would likely reach into the millions. Meanwhile, backstage at the program, the entire production crew had jumped to their feet, unable to believe what they were seeing. They rubbed their eyes in disbelief as the live viewership numbers shattered records, surging past 30 million viewers in an instant. The show had hit the top of the charts, and the studio erupted into a sea of joy as everyone realized they had a massive hit on their hands. Neo Dayton let out a long breath of relief. When the tomb started collapsing, he truly feared there would be a loss of life. Now that everyone was safe and the ratings were exploding, he didn't mind that the show had gone off the rails, and he signaled for silence. He congratulated the team on their success, promising doubled salaries and bonuses, before addressing the status of the competition's participants. He revealed that out of the 100 contestants, 99 had already called him to withdraw from the race, and he had accepted their requests. And so, with only one man left standing, he officially declared that this season of the program had reached its successful conclusion. He thanked the audience for watching, and we leave our heroes as they prepare for whatever strange journey comes next.